Once upon a time, there was a man called Robert who definitely isn't me. And he'd been raised in an environment with his primary caregivers and through his schooling and his religious upbringing to believe that obedience and submission to hierarchy and higher authority was very important. And he internalized the idea that to be a good person, you should do as you're told and you shouldn't be rebellious. When he grew up, he got into a loving relationship, he thought, with somebody. And that turned out to be a very, very painful experience for him. And I want to share with you 5 things that Robert learned that helped him to escape from that difficult and painful scenario. Robert had imbibed the idea by the time he'd reached 18 and done most of his education before going to university, that in order to be a good person, you should follow the rules. If you say you're going to do something, you should do it. That life is fundamentally fair and that good things happen to good people, and that when people say that they're something or that they're going to do something, largely speaking, they do. Robert was raised actually in a very ordered environment through his schooling, where there were rules, there were regulations, and largely speaking, people followed them. And if they didn't, they would be told very, very clearly that they had broken those rules. Robert wasn't instructed how to do relationships. It's a strange part of his education, a strange part of his upbringing. When he wanted to drive a car, he had to take lessons and pass a written test that showed that he understood the rules of the road. He had to be shown how to physically drive the car, but there was really no education for him in how to do relationships, what to look for, what to watch out for, what the different roles within the relationship would be. And it was just sort of left to him to figure it out. And he could only really do that by following what he'd read in books, seen in films, watched in Disney movies, and what he'd gathered from his peer group, which was not a great setup for Robert to navigate the stormy, dark waters of relationships in this modern age. Robert didn't really have many particularly difficult relationships when he was younger, when he was in his teens and when he was in his 20s. There was a few bits and pieces here and there, fairly normal stuff, people dealing with various mental health issues ranging from depression, anxiety, addiction, that kind of thing. They were fundamentally decent people just trying to grow up like he was and trying to make his way in the world, much as he was doing. Robert did not have a good relationship with his father. His father was narcissistic and psychopathic. His father actually ended up in prison for being abusive, specifically for being abusive to his children. The first thing that Richard learned on his road to recovery, Robert, it's not Richard, Robert learned on his road to recovery was that when someone is in your life and they're in a position of authority and you love them and you crave their love back and you listen to them, that you internalize that voice and you internalize their beliefs, and to some degree you internalize their worldview and you carry it with you and you use that to make your own map of reality. A lot of what Robert, it's totally Robert, had been taught was at an unconscious level was that he wasn't lovable just for being, that he had to perform in order to win temporary, fleeting attention, validation, little breadcrumbs of congratulation from his primary caregivers, who at the time of his growing up were mainly concerned with other things, like battling each other to the death. Indeed, Robert was raised in an environment where his household was a battleground between 2 warring, powerful, psychotic egos vying for control. And that, Robert later learned, the second thing he learned, was that became an imprint for what he thought love was. And the third thing that Robert learned was that a lot of our drives and our impulses and the way we make decisions are not conscious. They're unconscious. You can say you believe in love like this. You can say you want friendship like this. You can say you only want to engage in business relationships that are fair and straightforward and honest and adult. And we're both focused on a positive outcome together. You can say that, but if your unconscious has been programmed, written, scripted to operate in another direction, it is the unconscious that will win. Robert made the decision around the age of 28 that he'd finally had enough of one of his primary caregivers, the one who ended up in prison, and cut him out of his life. There was a brief period of respite and peace and calm. He was no longer being stalked, bullied, manipulated, cajoled, and guilt-tripped by a lunatic. And yes, when I say stalking, I mean literal stalking. Following me around, showing up at girlfriends' houses, peering through windows, all of that kind of thing. There was peace. The peace probably lasted about 9 months, something like that. And then Robert, to his own amazement, found himself falling deeply in love, deeply and rapidly in love with a person who he'd known many years before. They'd lost contact. And she seemed to be the woman of his dreams. Yes, she was the woman of his dreams. These dreams were dreamt by Satan, and Satan had a grudge against Robert and wanted his soul pulled backwards out of his bumhole slowly. Everything went well at first, more than well. It was wonderful. It was brilliant. Robert was so in love, and he was so grateful to be with this lady, with this woman. They'd been friends before, and now they were together romantically. It was very passionate. It was very exciting. The sex was remarkably good, 5-star reviews on Yelp, etc. But within a month or two, Robert started to feel strange feelings that he'd never felt with any of his previous girlfriends before. He started to feel confused. He started to feel hurt. And he started to feel like things were happening that he didn't like, but that he didn't have a right to say anything about. And Robert hadn't felt that way with any of his girlfriends through his teen years or his 20s. He'd only felt that way in childhood. So the fourth thing that our dear friend Robert learned in this process is that one of the signs you're not in a very equitable, healthy, adult, honest and open relationship will be strong sensations of confusion, a sense of dread, and a deep sense of injustice combined with a sense of impotence. I know that this is wrong, and I know I should be doing something about this, but I feel as though I can't. I feel frozen. You're smart and you know about this subject. You know that he was experiencing one of the effects of complex post-traumatic stress from his childhood and from the kind of wacky, lunatic, quote-unquote, love, or we should say, I was going to say attachment, to use more psychological terms. Probably trauma bond would be more appropriate. These things were tying directly back to his childhood experiences. And so he was primed to go into strong emotional flashbacks. The predominant one was one of freezing, because there was violence and rage in his household as a child. He would often find himself frozen in terror. The terror at times would be so strong that Robert developed a condition called alopecia nervosa, where after a bout of being screamed at, he hated being screamed at. He much preferred to be hit. It was much more preferable for him to be beaten than to be screamed at. His clumps of his hair would fall out. So he'd wake up with hair on his pillow and bald patches. He'd be going to school with bald patches because of this response. Time went on, and Robert felt trapped inside of a catch-22. He knew two things at the same time, two things that couldn't possibly both be true and yet were. He knew on the one hand, he had an amazing relationship with a wonderful woman who he deeply loved and who deeply loved him. This was just fact, undeniable, unquestionable fact, and he accepted it rigidly. He accepted it dogmatically. It was the new commandment. And on the other hand, his body, not his brain, not his intellect that he was so proud of before he mashed it up with boxing and cocaine, that his body knew that he was in danger. His body was registering threat. Body was registering injustice. So what he did as a psychology graduate who was very familiar with psychological concepts from an early age is he took this one and he just pushed it down as hard as he could. Because from Freud, Adler, Jung, Eric Berne, Kernberg, Kohut onwards, Melanie Klein, Marie von Franz, what they'll all tell you is if you feel a painful emotion, just shove fucker down, get it down, squeeze it away and pretend it's not existing. Hold it deep down inside. He did this so that he could continue to enjoy fantasy merry-go-round he was on and get all of the payoff of that experience. It was a strange life, a double life. He felt himself to be addicted. He felt like he was staying in the relationship because he didn't think he could do any better than that. He really fundamentally didn't believe that he was worth more than that. And he thought that if he lost her, that he would regret it for the rest of his life. Plus, he was loyal. Winners don't quit, quitters don't win. No fallen soldier left behind. And this lady had a really good sob story. It was a true sob story. He knew it was true. He'd met her family. He knew the bizarre, fatherless circumstances in which she was raised. Father abandoned her mother in a foreign country, which is the UK, went back to his home country, which was Malaysia, and like little franchises, started new families, got married multiple times, had multiple children. And then he would come back to the mother every 18 months, and that mother was not strong enough to refuse him. And so she would let him live with her romantically, sexually, and intimately as though they were husband and wife for 2 or 3 weeks. And he'd get his little sex and love holiday and see his son and his daughter, and then off he'd fuck, presumably to the next franchise. Charming gentleman. Well, actually, I said that sardonically, but he really was. He was a very, very charming, very, very charismatic guy who, when I met him, I expected a monster. But he wasn't a monster. He was funny. He was cool. He was sharp. He was full of energy and full of stories. Really a very, very charming man doing not very nice things and leaving a trail of broken hearts in his wake. It's not my job to psychoanalyze my ex-partners, but what seems to have happened is that my ex had internalized him as the role model rather than the mother. If you're interested in philosophy, you could say that she'd made a Nietzschean choice by deciding that on the one hand we could see the mentality of a slave, and on the other hand we could see the mentality of a master, and she had chosen the master mentality. Better to be predator than prey, better to be a winner than a loser. And I was probably being groomed to play the role that her mother had played. So you see, when we're talking about narcissistic abuse, gender, these people are not white, gender, ethnicity, religion, age really doesn't matter. Sexuality doesn't matter. Same-sex relationships play out the same way. If I was called Roberta and this was a man I was talking about, the mechanics would be the same. The manifestations would be different. The way men and women, males and females, and people in different cultures play out narcissism is downstream of the narcissism itself. The narcissism is the same, and then it must be expressed through the culture in a way that means they can get away with what they're doing. I'm going to share with you the fifth thing that Robert learned, and this is what helped him to overcome the narcissistically abusive relationship and to get on with his life. But I have to tell you, friends, he didn't just learn it. If this was a movie, he'd open a mystical book up a mountain surrounded by monks with shaved heads going, Om, and then a bright light. This is like an 80s movie, but I'm a child of the 80s. A bright light would shine out of the book and he would see it. And then there'd be a montage of like the stars and realization, and he'd fly through the galaxy and then he'd realize this lesson. But that's not how it played out. He had to learn this lesson again and again and again for around 15 years. This is not a condemnation. You don't have to learn this lesson over 15 years. You have me to help you. I know the shortcuts. And you don't have to follow the dark and rocky path I did. You can do it faster. He learned something that was broken in him in childhood, and I want to share it with you. Robert learned definitively and absolutely, without question, it was not his job to carry the burdens of other adults. Robert learned unequivocally and without question to say, that is not my responsibility, that is yours. 15 years minimum it took him to learn to see that with clarity. It took him 15 years to recognize when people were inviting him to play the role of savior. It took him 15 years to recognize when internally he felt activated and motivated to play the role of savior. And make no mistake about it, he's not some innocent victim in this. He was full of lust himself, greedy, to maintain this relationship that he thought was the best thing ever because he'd idealized this woman so highly in his fantasy. He was proud, he was stubborn, stiff, and he really didn't want to accept it because he liked playing the role of savior. He learned early on, before all of this, about concepts like the Karpman triangle from transactional analysis, where you can be playing either the role of persecutor, savior, or victim. He knew that, but he knew it intellectually. There was lots that Robert knew intellectually. He read a lot and he thought a lot. He didn't embody much of it though, sadly, and I suspect that's true of many of us. So don't judge Robert too harshly. Once he'd learned that, as sad as this woman's story was, it really wasn't his job, his role, or his responsibility to save her. He also learned he didn't have the capacity to save her. He then, at the tail end of their 16-year process, realized actually it's nobody's job to save anybody else. There's no adult who can save another adult in this sense. If somebody's in a burning house, you can run in and take them out and you would have effectively saved them, but not in this sense, not in this sense. I'm packing a lot into lesson 3. The hardest part of lesson 3, but the most powerful part of lesson 3. Lesson 5, I'm sorry, I'm doing night shoots at the moment and my brain is scrambled. The hardest part of lesson 5, the final lesson, was for him to accept in his masculine, potent pride that he wasn't capable of saving her. And worse, she actually didn't want to be saved. And this confused him a lot because she kept on making signals that she wanted to be saved. The entire story or fantasy or shared fantasy of the relationship that they had was on the basis that she wanted to be saved. And then he learns a bitter lesson. There are people out there who will pretend to be one thing, but are actually something completely different. There are people out there who will say that they want to be saved. They don't want to be saved. They want your attention. They want your services. They want you to work for them. They want to enslave you under the premise that you are, inverted commas, helping them, saving them. Robert now lives by a different set of rules, whether it is family or friends. He will talk to people who have problems and he'll offer a little bit of advice if he's asked. And you might think this is awful. Robert should be kind. He knows about psychology. Robert knows all too well that when a friend or a family member asks for his advice, if he gives it, it's like pouring water into a bucket with holes in it. They're not really listening. So there's no point. He keeps it brief. He keeps it principles based. He knows they're only going to remember about 2 things out of the conversation anyway, and largely speaking, they just want to be heard. And then he cordially invites them to find a therapist, and then to attend therapy, and to keep attending therapy, and to pay for it with their own money, and to keep going until the problem starts to ameliorate, which typically takes time. These are the 5 things that our friend Robert learned. A lot of time was wasted and a lot of pain was experienced. I condensed it for you and I made a few stories, one story. Because obviously in the 80s movie, once the light from the Tibetan book hit him in the eyes, he was forever enlightened, right? No, he had to go and learn it again. And then in business, he had to learn it again and again and again. And then in his friendships, I think you're seeing the pattern. Why was Robert like this? Because he'd been taught in childhood that it was his job to take on the burdens of damaged adults. He'd been taught from an early age, Robert, you are a vessel, you are a dustbin, you are a garbage can into which people can throw their problems. Robert, you are a service provider. You only have meaning, you only have significance. You're only lovable, not even lovable, noticeable when you do something for me. Raised by tyrants, raised, frankly, into Nietzsche's slave mentality. And then Robert had to learn that that was not his only source of significance. He could have significance, he could be lovable outside of providing service and outside of destroying himself so that somebody else could live. I hope you heard that clearly. If you're running a belief or a pattern that you have to sacrifice all that you have just so other people will see you and love you, then you should go and get that fit. You should get that therapy, as my friend Jeff used to say. That's the story of Robert. We leave him there and we wish him well. And we wish all Roberts and Robertas across the globe, wherever they are, Africa, Japan, Russia, Uzbekistan, Uruguay, Alaska, all humans who are of the Roberta or Robert variety, we wish them well, and we hope that they learn their lessons sooner rather than later. ladies and gents, I have a new course. It is hopefully the last course I ever make. I don't think I'll need to make another one after this. I've set myself no time limits, no restrictions. I've treated it as though I'm doing face-to-face coaching with you. And so if I need to cover a topic and it needs to be covered thoroughly, I take the time to do it. At the moment, I think the course is around 15 hours long. If I need to make amendments afterwards, I reserve the right to do that. I will continue adding to this course for as long as I feel is necessary until I've gone, okay, that's it. That's me. I've said everything I can say about helping people to recover from narcissistic abuse. The course is a total roadmap, a total narcissistic abuse recovery roadmap from beginning, step by step by step by step by step to the end. The syntax of the course has been set carefully. You're going to ask in the comments, can I do this with my therapist? Can I do this with my counselor? Please do. Please do get the assistance of a qualified mental health practitioner, preferably one who has a very good understanding of narcissistic abuse, and they can go through the course with you and they can adapt bits of the course for you. If you do the course, I can't promise that all the problems will go away in a few months. What I would say is a realistic target is that inside of 2 months of working on the course, you would start to feel 80 to 90% better. That's realistic. And you might go, well, that would mean I only have 10% healing to do. Yes, my friends, but that last 10 might be an ongoing journey for the rest of your life. I want you to set your expectations properly. It's a very good course. I'm very happy with it. It's very thorough. It leaves no stone unturned, but it is a course. It's a course we do online. So there's a limit to how much it can actually do. Therapy is going to help as well. If you do these techniques and your therapist takes the techniques and adapts them for you specifically, it's going to be very, very powerful. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Thank you.